Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Abby Cornett, and I'm the patient advocate for IG Living Magazine. This podcast is brought to you by IG Living Magazine to give readers an opportunity to hear from healthcare experts on topics important to them. In this session, we will discuss the rights and responsibilities associated with different types of service animals. Today, I have the great pleasure of inviting one of my dear friends from when I was in the legislature to speak. Her name, Shannon Anderson, is professionally an attorney who specializes in public advocacy and risk management. Her dog, Neely, though, could care less about all of that. Neely will tell you Shannon keeps a steady supply of wholesome treats on hand, is committed not only to regular walks, but adventure walks, and most importantly, has arranged for important therapy work opportunities. Neely, with her handler, Shannon, has been recognized as an angel dog at Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital in Nebraska and has volunteered with them since 2014 and is retiring this summer. Neely will also share with you that as a standard poodle, she has found her human to be at times a bit yippy and hyper, but she will keep her nonetheless. To give a little context about today's topic, I've been working with a trainer for several months to get our dog certified as a service dog. And when we started the process, I didn't understand the different classifications and legal requirements or the amount of training involved. Throughout the journey, I learned a lot and decided to write a blog for our readers to inform patients about these classifications if they're looking at getting a service animal. After I published the blog, Shannon, who is great at this, pointed out I missed something because I only wrote in the blog about service animals and emotional support animals. And Shannon, as I said in her biography, works with therapy dogs. And knowing Shannon has a therapy dog, I gave her a call and invited her to be our guest today. And with her legal and personal background experience, I thought she'd be an excellent guest. So Shannon, thank you for being here today.
Well, you're welcome, Abby. It's a very exciting topic. And probably the one thing that we should talk a little bit about is just that you and I are just big time over the moon dog lovers.
Oh, without a doubt.
But we want to make certain that people understand many types of animals are therapy animals. Yes. And we want to just make that over the top cats and birds and rabbits. And you've heard of
miniature horses.
Ponies. Yeah.
When I was reading federal statute, I was like, horses. Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So can you tell our listeners or explain them how you got working with therapy dogs? What was your driving reason?
It's very common. It's always a referral, isn't it? It's always a friend doing something or that you find out about some of the most interesting hobbies in your life that become a passion. I was visiting a patient at the Madonna Rehab Hospital, and a family friend was the CEO at the time at the hospital, just ran into her in the hallways. And she had asked me, she had just received a presentation from their therapy dog volunteer program. And she asked me, why aren't you doing that? Because she had met my dog. And at that time, it was a different dog than this one, than Neely. It was it got me thinking about the therapy dog. It would be another 3 or 4 years before I got into the program. And primarily because of this, my dog, Bridget, was a miniature silver poodle. And she was gorgeous. And people were drawn to her being gorgeous. Bridget wasn't drawn to people. And so the first lesson I had to learn and really consider is that you may have you can have a great dog, but it may not be great for therapy. And that's because, and in your presentation, Abby, and in all fairness, is that the emotional dog, service dog, and the service dog belong together categorically because they are both for one person. Correct. And they're going to address one category of needs of that person, or maybe several different needs within that, but they are for one person. A therapy dog belongs to the world. So the first thing you look for in a dog is that they initiate contact with other animals, with other, particularly humans though, and that they react to them and they engage with them. And not every dog does that. So it was then from that point, it was the very first 24 hours I knew Neely, who is a standard poodle, was cut out to be a therapy dog. And it from there, we just got into, we'll continue the story later, but you could just tell.
That she was meant for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my dog is meant for what she does, so I understand that. And I've had dogs my entire life, and I've had them where they were absolutely did not care one way or the other about people, or
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's great. They used to tease me about Bridget that she thought that unconditional love was overrated. You know?
now with the legal status for service dogs and therapy dogs, I learned quite a bit. A service dog particularly has certain legal protections under the ADA. So they can go into most public places. They can go into restaurants. They're trained to perform specific tasks for their handler. While they require no specific certification or registration by law, they must be well behaved and controlled in public. Mm-hmm. Now, therapy dogs, emotional support dogs, don't have the same legal protections. They have some when it comes to housing, but not exactly the same. So what legal protections do therapy dogs have, and where can they go, and what are their requirements for that?
Mm-hmm. Excellent questions. Now, we want to make certain that everybody should check with their local ordinances for the city, statutes for the state, and you can do that through an organization that is either working with therapy dogs, working with service dogs, or licensed mental health professionals who are familiar with emotional support. So this is going to be very high level sorts of things to look at. As we first mentioned and talked about, is that our therapy dogs belong to the world. And I say that because their appointments, their engagement in this world, if you will, with humans is by invitation. It's not a service dog. It's where you want to go. It's for emotional support. I have a friend whose daughter is on campus, and the university that she's attending, allows emotional support animals. They got the correct documentation together. And then it just comes down to making certain you don't have a roommate with allergies, or, those kinds of living things, living together, living with others that you look for. And as you pointed out, that the service dogs are covered by the ADA. Therapy dogs really aren't covered. And so this is what path you take. You take a certification path. Highly encouraged. There are these vests. There are vests that you can buy online everywhere. And, just watch that. Because the number one rule when you decide that you're going to share the gifts of your dog as a therapy dog is that you have to be the advocate for your dog. You have to protect your dog. You have to put your dog in places for success.
My dog has her service vest, and it's amazing when I pass people with other dogs with service vests. The dogs are out of control. They bark. They try and attack. And I don't think people realize that to actually get certified, it was thousands of dollars in 2 years of training.
Mm-hmm. Right now, there's an organization in Nebraska called Domestic Pups, and they're fully engaged with the whole spectrum of services for dogs. And I received our initial training through them for therapy dogs, but they do service dogs, as well as they have a prison program for dogs. So the prisoners learn how to train dogs. And then there's a weekend warrior program where those of us on the outside can take them for the weekend and take them to places that the prisoners can't. And then they're put up for adoption. You've got these beautifully trained dogs through that program. And so this week, we're right in the middle of a 12-day period where 4 people from around the country, they said this time the 4 are from the Midwest. One is a person I know, have known for years, a little girl I've watched grow up with her disabilities. They're in training. They've got their service dogs. The reveal was this weekend, and now they'll spend 12-hour days for the next, they've got 8 more days left, learning about that. That dog, Hamilton is the dog's name, cost $28,000.
Well, Fiona was a free dog from a rescue as a
Huh?
puppy, but
Mhm.
training is expensive. And, one or
And
two
so
times.
these puppies, when they're first puppy, there are special programs that domestic pups have that they interview and train persons who will take that dog for their first year
Mhm.
and do a very rigid program that first year. Then it moves to another program to get refined. Then the applicants, there's the other side of it where the applicants submit their information. And then if they're accepted, they have to give additional information. Everything from she had to give cotton swabs from the inside of her mouth so that when she has a seizure, they know what to look for. The dog will recognize the smell, right? And I mean, it's just a very thorough program. And so, in a lot of ways, for $28,000, you're getting a good deal,
You
because,
are. I can't think of how much I've actually spent on pet
yeah, yeah.
because it's
So,
$100 a half an hour.
oh, yeah. And good. Thank you for doing that because
Yeah,
that's setting a dog up for success. So,
that's the whole thing. So real
so
quick,
for the therapy dog,
and tell me about
I,
Midnight Day.
yes, okay. Very simply, there are organizations around the country, and then they have local chapters that, and I highly suggest that they go into a program that they can affiliate with. And I'll tell you why. Each program for therapy dogs basically have the same requirements. You have to pass both the Canine Good Citizenship courses from the AKC, both parts 1 and 2. And then you have to show that the dog has actually adopted those good practices, not just show the certificates and you still have a wild dog on your hands. So you show them the certificates, and then you start. A lot of the programs will have separate classes, or they will have the testing date, and then they'll have test prep for you so they can help you. For example, and then what's interesting, the reason why joining an organization makes so much sense is that they know who they will send you to. So there's one organization in Nebraska that really caters to teachers. And so they know the schools, they know what the schools' requirements are. You go in, and the teachers are familiar with the program, the students are familiar, and that makes for such a better program and better outcomes, I should say, for that relationship. There's some that do nursing homes exclusively, nursing homes, assisted living, skilled, and those facilities are comfortable with the therapy dog program, and so they'll train you then. So, for example, we were certified through Domestic Pups originally for nursing homes, and there was a lot of work with narrow spaces, loud noises, things like that, and just making decisions about it's one of the neat things about therapy dogs. A little bit of trivia here, I suppose, is that you're discouraged as a handler to teach them tricks. And the reason why is because you do not want to take anything away from the patient you're visiting. And so, particularly at the rehab hospitals, when this is acute rehab and they are seriously, seriously ill and compromised, your the standard for a successful visit is the patient had 1 minute where they weren't thinking of their pain, that they got so absorbed in that dog and that connection and their memories of dogs or their tactile sensations, and that's it, 1 minute. And you might be there 15 minutes, you might be there 5 minutes, but you'll know when it clicks. And so will the dog. And the dog will let you know, my work is done here, and so it's very, very sweet. But you take those 2 AKC courses, and then you work directly with the organization to say, what else do we need? In my organization, there's separate policy manual that you had to learn and you'd be tested on. Then you had a rigorous test because they wanted you to be familiar with some of the high-end equipments that you'll find in rooms, the wheelchairs, loud noises, sudden noises, lots of people. One of the worst things that happens, a therapy dog may or may not have some identification on when they're in that facility, because there isn't a service dog vest. There isn't, we have little bandanas, but the people will just swarm, your dog. And you're tested on that pretty extensively, because that can be very frightening for a dog to have 4 or 5 humans hovering, and everybody means well, and I always say the worst, we had a certification through the organization we were with as Pet Partners, and they were actually out of Seattle, Washington, and they had different levels of certification, and we received the complex, the highest designation, so we could do pediatrics. And I'm telling you, Abby, you know what I'm talking about with your girls. The worst fear is that 3-year-old toddler who's swaying, like they used to say, the drunken sailor, with their index finger pointed out, and it will hit the corner of the dog's eye every time. And that just sends a dog, that's severe pain. So you got to kind of sweep the dog away from the toddler, and the toddler's just happy coming at you like the, Michelin tire man swaying back and forth. So that goes back to being that dog's advocate and really protecting them, because you're there on invitation. You're there, you're not given any special legal, it's right, except for whatever your statutes are and your ordinances about if a dog is treated as property or not. Obviously, the big concern is to have a dog be reactive and bite. And it's pretty, I find it cute, but, because you have to meet people where they are, but they'll always ask me, does she bite? And I'll say, well, you kind of get thrown out of the program if you do that, But I think that people don't realize how much training we go through, and that we wouldn't bring a dog in to a hospital that had any predisposition to biting or jumping or, snapping at somebody. You just can't do that. So that's what these organizations make certain. And then you have regular training and testing available. Testing in my programs every 4 years. Some programs are sooner than that. One of the other, if I may, Abby, one of the other things I want to get out there, that people who may just not like hospitals, and that's fair. There's a sweet, very engaging program that's reading to students.
Oh, that's nice.
Libraries will have it. Schools will have it in their classroom. You take your dog in, you have a mat. The dog lays down on a mat. You may have another mat for the student. It just depends on what the school or the library provides. You get all lined up, even on the floor, or if you're going to be at a table, then the dog should be able to see over the table, and the child begins to read. And typically these programs are in 3rd and 4th grade, because the reading curriculum in the United States ends in 3rd grade. And when you're in 4th grade, you're expected to read. And so for those children that didn't quite get all of it done in 3rd grade, they're at quite a disadvantage in 4th grade, or can be. And that's a very general statement, because schools have tremendous reading curriculums, but that's how they target it. And so what happens is that you just give the child picks out a book, sits between, next to the dog, and starts to read. When the child hits a word that they don't understand, they'll obviously look at you, and then you'll say, and you sound it out, or however you're comfortable doing. And then you know what happens? The child oftentimes will look at the dog and say, Neely, didn't you know that? And that's just confidence. These are children that can't read in front of the class because of fear or lack of confidence. These are children that just have some shyness, but boy, to the dog, they're like, oh, come on, and then we'll reward Neely for getting the word right. And then they're like, okay, let's keep reading.
That's amazing. And one of my children had dyslexia.
Oh, yes.
She's an excellent reader now. She's, college, the whole great grades. But she still doesn't like reading out loud in public.
Yeah.
And that takes that stigma away, because the dog's not going to make fun of you.
No. And the dog will look at the child, and just because they can hear the change of tone of voice. And a lot of times they're sitting on the floor, the dog will have their leg over their leg. It really gets cozy, and you can just watch that develop between them, that relationship and that confidence.
So you've kind of told us what Neely does or where she goes. Give me an idea what Neely's typical day out is working.
Okay. Well, curiously, a good visit is no more than an hour long, because it's so exhausting for the dog. The worst trap in any facility is leaving, because people want to know the people that weren't involved in that reading session or in that wing of the hospital. They want to be able to pet the dog, and can you come see my, so it's just like leaving is always like, Neely has left the auditorium, it's like,
No more
so,
encores.
yeah. So you walk in, I mentioned that we had a bandana. We have a backpack that has to be carried with all of your necessities. In the event of an accident, a first aid situation, you always have a brush with you. You always have a water bowl with you and a water source. You carry that in with you, and your badges, your identifications. You check in with the facility. They'll tell you if certain rooms had requested a dog that week or who's expecting you, and then you go off to do that. You enter the room cautiously or, courteously. You want to say hello to the children that are going to read with you, or you're going to, and as I mentioned with reading, you have set up some mats and that for yourself, and you introduce the dog and what you're going to do. Similarly, in a hospital one-on-one, you will say, I'm part of I'm a volunteer here, or Madonna, I understand you have requested to see a dog. Is this a good time? And you go in. In the hospital setting, you ask no questions of anybody of why you're here. And that's wise to do for children as well, right? You just keep it focused on the task at hand. Neely has an interesting tell, if you will, and that is she goes to each caregiver in the room first. So if the grandparents are there, or, the husband and wife and whatnot, she goes to them first to thank them for being a caregiver. And so she gets them all relaxed, and then it's all focused on the patient. And as I said, we did children. So she oftentimes would hop up on the bed and spoon with them, or lay her head on their chest so they could see them. And then that just gets the child in a zone. They've got a dog that's just looking at them they only see their beautiful eyes, and it's almost magical what happens. You'll get them talking about their dogs. It'll get them talking about the happier stories. And you look for that 1 minute where they just relaxed and realize, and for 1 minute, we're not in a hospital hooked up to tubes and that. So then
connection.
Yeah. You can look for that normal life. You do a lot of hand washing. You do a lot of, when you enter a room and you leave a room, you're always washing your hands to go to the next room. And even between children, we're always encouraged to carry the soap. How would you, after COVID, forget what that's called, but everything from the wipes to the gel.
Oh yeah, that disinfectant gel.
Yeah. Oh my heavens.
I still have a gallon under my kitchen sink.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you gotta always have it no matter what. The other thing you do is you're mindful of staff. So the librarians, you walk over to the librarians, maybe take the dog around the counter and say, you want to pet the dog? And they're relieved and they love doing it. You ask the nurses, the physical therapists. Now you can take it to the next level. In the hospitals, for example, we've actually participated in individual therapy sessions. There was a child, 18 months old, that wasn't speaking, but had been speaking before her incident. And when Neely came around the corner one day, she yelled out, puppy. Oh. And so they said, come here. And so we went 3 times a week to help her through her therapy sessions. We did that on the other end for a 19-year-old who was in a serious injury and wasn't responding. And so that she saw the dog outside and asked, and we started going to her appointments. A lot of times it's just getting them to move differently. So you put the dog on their left side because they have some weakness on their right side, and have them feed the treats to the dog. So they're doing a cross body motion.
Shannon, we're running out of time for the amount that we're allotted, but I have one last thing to ask you, and you kind of went over it. When someone's interested in maybe looking at a therapy dog program, you said go to their local
organization. So right, you're going to see it online. Type in therapy dogs, Lincoln, Nebraska, Sacramento, California, and start there and ask your veterinarian. Ask the nursing, if you have a relationship to nursing homes, do you have therapy dogs come and visit you? And they'll tell you who they go through. So it's not as hard. ask you look if the libraries have a reading program, ask them who they go through to get readers to come. So yeah, sometimes there's fees related because they do provide a test and some training perhaps, but it's so reasonable to have that resource, Abby. Anytime something happens that you're unsure of, call the organization, say, what would you recommend that I should have done in that situation?
I was going to say, when I started the service dog training, it was kind of flying blind. I started with looking at the federal ADA law and then looking for a trainer. But all of there's a ton of paperwork involved.
Yes. For therapy dogs, you do a background check. They will do a criminal background check, and they have a policy book that you have to learn, depending on the organization you're with. But it's so rewarding. You just have to look for that dog that belongs to the world.
I was going to say.
And
that's the one problem I've had with my dog is she's a service dog. But if somebody says, "Oh, look at the puppy," she was like, "Hi." I'm like, you're not really supposed to
meet your needs.
So I wanted to thank you again so much for joining me today. And I know a lot of our listeners have different types of animals that work as support animals. And I thought, touching on the therapy dog or the therapy animal program would be interesting. And I really didn't understand, everybody's seen therapy dogs, but, I didn't really understand what the qualifications were or what they did. So, listeners, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Additional information about this podcast can be found on our website at www.igliving.com. If you have any questions that were not answered, please contact me at acornett@igliving.com. Look for the next IG Living podcast announcement on our website for the opportunity to submit your questions. IG Living Advocate is a copyrighted production of IG Living Magazine, published by FFF Enterprises, the only magazine for immune globulin community comprised of patients who suffer from chronic illness and their caregivers.